This is a story about a Chinese painter. It started a century ago. During the Chinese New Year, a traditional festival of China, a strange occurrence took place in a small village in southern China.
It was in the morning of the Chinese New Year. When the villagers woke up in a festive mood, they were shocked, if not horrified, to find that all the new couplets they posted the night before on their gates were gone. The couplets, written with ink and brush on red paper, were usually verses to pray for blessings. The villagers, having no idea what happened, saw it as bad luck. It turned out the thief was a 6-year-old boy who was fervently in love with the color red. Back at his house, he dipped the red paper into water and enjoyed the formation of his red ink.
No one expected that in the decades to come, this child so passionate for the color red would become a renowned master of painting. Red would also become the most eye-catching color in his works. He was Guan Shanyue, an extraordinary master of art.
Guangzhou is a modern city that sees speedy development in the 21st century. While old houses are torn down and new high-rise buildings are constructed, a 2-story house is left untouched. This building was the home of famous Chinese artist Guan Shanyue. He began to live here since the early 1980s, and he spent the final years of his life here. This house is over 2,100 square feet. It's furnished in a simple and unique style. Everything is left the way it was when Guan Shanyue lived here. The wind chime sounds seem to be recounting the life of an extraordinary soul.
关山月先生作为岭南画派的代表人物，他也是一个比较全面的画家。过去无论是人物、山水、花鸟，应该说他是个全才。
我觉得关老这个人呢，很睿智，但是呢又很顾全大局，对于社会的变化很敏感，在各个时代他能够生存。 能够比较好的发挥自己，这个是要很高的智慧。
他总是把自己的创作跟一个国家、跟一个民族的这样的一个关系连接在一块，体现一个党员艺术家他固有的这种社会担当跟政治责任。
关老他为什么能成为一个大家？ 他一直相信笔墨当随时代，这个话出自实陶，但是关老一辈子就这么实践的。他说不走路不出门，他没有画，所以他一直在动，在艺术探索的道路上一直没有停顿，就是永远在路上。
As an icon of the Lingnan School of Art, Guan Shanyue lived a life of all sorts of tests and difficulties. However, he focused his attention more on the destiny of his country and his people. His artworks bear witness to those life-changing moments in recent Chinese history and have become part of the collective memory of those who live in this land.
In 1912年农历的9月16号，我的父亲出生于广东省阳江县的果园村。果园村呢，因为都是姓关的，所以我们大家都称它是关村。那么其实果园村只有10几户人家，连中农都没有1户的。
Guan Shanyue was born in 1912, the year in which the Qing dynasty was overthrown. His father gave him a name, Yingxin, which means to go with the new era. Guan Shanyue's works closely mirrored the times in which he lived. people can feel the spirit of the age in each of his representative works. Now, when we tell his stories, it feels like we are reliving that eventful century in China.
In the late 19th century, it was popular in the countryside of Guangdong to decorate houses with scrolls of calligraphy and/or paintings. Those who had some schooling, however, though limited it was, would try to sharpen their skills in calligraphy and painting, because it was a way to make money. Guan Shanyue was born into a family with many children, and in order to feed so many mouths, his father had to travel around to do such work. With his father's influence, Guan Shanyue loved painting very much. However, as soon as he started school, his father told him to quit painting, because back in those days, there was no glory in artwork, and the goal of education is to prepare a young person to start a respectful career someday. His mother, however, was supportive of his artistic pursuit. Since the father was absent most of the time, she was able to let him focus on painting. As a mother, she often felt guilty that she had no capacity to give him a better environment to develop his genius. She tried her best to help him.
他干完自己的活以后，就到山上去砍柴，背着那些柴到很远的集市去卖，卖的钱马上在那里跟他买点图纸回来。然后他没有颜色，妈妈就到山上去摘点那些野果，把那个花的跟那个果的那个汁拧下来就黄颜色，然后把那些瓦片在地上磨些粉，然后调出来是赭色。
His mother was illiterate, but with such strong maternal love, she found ways for her boy to develop his artistic skills. Throughout his artistic career, Guan Shanyue has shown unusual interest in painting red plum flowers in bloom. He seems to prefer red to all other colors. When he was a little boy, his passionate love for red almost got him into big trouble. His mother tried to extract all kinds of colors from plants, but she just couldn't get the bright red from any flower or fruit. It was frustrating to both her and her son. As the Chinese New Year was approaching, every household in the village began to post the newly made couplets on their doors. That red color caught the attention of the 6-year-old boy. On the New Year's Eve, the boy did something bold by stealing the couplets from every household to make his own red ink. When his father found out what the boy did, he was, of course, outraged. Thankfully, the villagers were forgiving, and they decided not to punish this child for his mischief. As more children were born into this family and the financial burden worsened, Guan Shanyue's artistic pursuit became even more difficult.
In 1930, 19-year-old Guan Shanyue came to Guangzhou. It was the first big city he'd ever been to after he grew up. Because his family was poor, he chose a normal school or a teacher's school, which provided free tuition. But painting was still a dream in his heart. Whenever he had time, he would go to observe and learn from others' paintings and calligraphy. A painting he accidentally saw influenced his entire life.
When Guan Shanyue saw this painting, he was fascinated by the eagle on the rock. Something touched him deep in the heart. The painting was created by a famous master, Gao Jianfu. Gao Jianfu was the founder of the art of the Lingnan School. He was a follower of Dr. Sun Yat-sen during the Chinese Revolution. After the revolution, he established the famous Shanyue Academy of Art, focusing on innovating Chinese painting and promoting the new Chinese painting movement.
在清王朝的末年，传统的中国画已经走到了一个没落的地步了，已经了无生机了，已经走投无路了。岭南画派在这样的一个关口当中，依照着辛亥革命的推动，依托着新文化运动的开展，整套思想，在这100年的中国画的发展历史里头，起了一个关键性的作用。
Guan Shanyue fell in love with Gao Jianfu's works at first glance. Henceforth, he became a frequent visitor of the art exhibitions at the Shanyue Academy of Art. Sometimes he would catch Gao Jianfu working, trying to learn by heart how he composed an image and how he manipulated every stroke and every color. Then after he went back to his dormitory, he'd make an imitation from memory. He had a desire in his heart that he wanted to learn under the tutelage of Gao Jianfu. However, while he worked extremely hard to become a brilliant artist, disasters descended upon him one after another.
When Guan Shanyue was 21 years old, his family suffered one misfortune after another. His younger sister died at an early age. Then his parents died. Guan Shanyue had hoped he could study in college, but now he had to work as an elementary school teacher in Guangzhou to make a living.
While he was grieving for the multiple losses in his life, he read in a composition written by a 4th grader he was teaching. My father was ill, and we couldn't afford a doctor. We couldn't afford medicine or food. I thought I should quit school and start working. That means I would not be able to continue my study. What should I do? He was very sympathetic over her lamenting. He visited the girl named Li Shu-jen and learned about her family background. She was born to a poor family, and her father was a folk opera actor who could not perform because of his illness, and now the whole family was living in debt. Guan Shanyue immediately offered her some money to buy medicine for her father, although he himself was in financial difficulty too. Similar experiences and sentiments drew the two bereaved souls together. On September 2nd, 1935, they became married. They cherished each other deeply and built a new home together. Even though life was still difficult, they remained happy and content with each other's love and companionship.
Guangzhou has a famous university, Sun Yat-sen University. It was established by its namesake, considered the founder of modern China. With a history of more than 100 years, it is well known for its scientific research and talent training. Yet few people know it also changed the life of Guan Shanyue.
In the fall of 1935, Gao Jianfu started his evening classes at Sun Yat-sen University. Guan Shanyue was extremely excited by the news and decided to grasp the opportunity to learn from his master.
但是他这个课嘛，要中山大学的学生拿着学生证去报名，那他没有学生证，他不是中大的学生嘛。
To get the opportunity to study from the master he worshipped for a long time, He found a friend studying at the university and used his ID to get a pass. Then he began to attend the class using his friend's identity. Because he was using someone else's identity, he felt extremely nervous in the classroom.
高建福老师在黑板上钉出一张画，就是让他的学生在下面临摹。那么他就在下面也临了以后，那个高老师就下来学生这边走动，就指导一下学生嘛，辅导一下。走到关山月的背后就停下来不走了。 那他就害怕，哎呀，是不是知道我是冒充学生？
Because Guan Shanyue had been imitating Gao Jianfu's paintings for a long time, his imitation was almost identical to Gao's original painting. This was quite a surprise to the master. When he found out that Guan Shanyue was eager to learn from the master under the disguise of someone else's identity, he didn't blame him. Instead, he decided to take the young man as his private student in his Shanyue Academy of Art. Gao Jianfu not only taught the young man artistic techniques, but also gave him a new name and a new life. Guan Shanyue's father gave him two names. First name was Yingxin, meaning refreshing, and the second name was Zuopei, meaning shower of bounty. After he became Gao Jianfu's student, the master named him with three characters from an ancient poem, Guan Shanyue, meaning moon over the mountain, by which the world knew him. With the new name and high hopes the master had for him, Guan Shanyue entered a new chapter in his life. That year, he was 24 years old. Because he started as a self-taught artist, he only had a vague understanding of the art of the Lingnan school. However, under the tutelage of Gao Jianfu, he began to grasp the essence of the new Chinese painting promoted by the Lingnan school.
现在我们全国上下的艺术家个个都去写生，但是当年是没有人提出写生的，是岭南画派最早提出来的，而且经过到了第二代，光山叶先生这一代呢，已经把这些理论跟实践的结合，并且有了比较完美的一个呈现。所以光老呢，在这样的一个历史的转折阶段，在一个承前启后的关键点上面，做出了他的历史的贡献。
2 years after he entered the Shanyue Academy of Art, the anti-Japanese war broke out, and the whole of China was thrown into hell. His life was to be changed completely. On October 21st, 1938, Japan occupied Guangzhou, followed by ruthless killings and all sorts of violence. At the time, Guan Shanyue was with his classmates, making sketches in a village far from the city. When the news came, everybody was shocked. He was worried about his master and his wife, but unfortunately, he lost contact with them. He began to escape with the other refugees.
跟着高建福老师去写生以后，高老师说他要回广州处理他的事。那我父亲他们几个学生呢，继续留在新会，就等老师的消息。广州一临县，大家都跑掉了。我妈妈是到了那个韶关那边，然后我爸是到新会，大家分开了。以前也很难通信，谁知道谁在哪里？后来知道了高老师去了澳门，我父亲就说：“不行，我一定要去找老师。”
In October 1938, a few days prior to the fall of Guangzhou, Gao Jianfu went to Macau. and was invited to stay in a Buddhist retreat named Puji Zen Temple. At the end of November, after a trip filled with dangers and difficulties, Guan Shanyue arrived at Macau and reunited with Gao Jianfu.
10月21号，广州是沦陷的，但是高炫富刚好离开。关圣远逃难的时候呢，跟西图奇啊，就逃到哪里呢？逃到开平。后来呢，他从开平的时候呢，就去了香港。在香港的时候呢，才知道高炫富先生呢就住在澳门，所以呢，他从香港里面呢过澳门的。曾经我跟关老来到这里的时候，关老告诉我。 里面呢就有2张床，其中有1张是他睡的地方，就在这里。
Although he found his teacher and a place to stay, life was never easy for Guan Shanyue. Because the temple did not offer food to outsiders, Guan Shanyue had to figure something out. He must find a way to continue his study with Gao Jianfu, while trying to feed himself somehow. In the beginning of the war, Da Aria Preta was a fishing port in northern Macau. In the late 1930s, Guan Shanyue often came here for sketching. He also found a way of living here.
他从小都很懂渔民的生活，把自己当成他们的家人一样，帮人家搬这弄那，所以很快就跟他们混熟了。结果人家吃饭的时间，番薯人家有2个也给1个他吃，人家熬了1碗番薯粥也要舀点给他吃，等于他肚子可以甜一点吧。
With the help of the fishermen, Guan Shanyue found a way to continue his study without being starved to death. In the day, he'd go to the beach to do sketches and got some food from the fishermen. And at night, he'd go back to the temple to study with Gao Jianfu. He was hungry most of the time, but he survived. He thus spent his first 6 months like this in Macau, and that was the most important time in his life. Touched by his eagerness and perseverance, Gao Jianfu began to show him his most precious collections of ancient artworks. Every night the master would unfurl the scrolls and ask Guan Shanyue to make imitations. He would show him meticulously how to make every detail concise. Through this practice, Guan Shanyue studied systematically the ancient Chinese art traditions and finally grasped the essence of the spirit.
避难的时候啊，他们2个在澳门关系很密切，受教也在那里啊。那段时间他进步大，从很传统的东西，经过写生，经过个人的理解和构思，转化为自己的东西，这个是大家都在这里。
At the time, half of China was occupied by the Japanese army, and millions were made homeless like him. The wrath and sorrow in his heart inspired him to create a large number of patriotic works, encouraging people to fight against the Japanese invaders. In January 1940, Guan Shanyue held his first exhibition at a middle school in Macau. It became an overwhelming success and attracted large crowds of visitors. The newspapers published feature stories about his art. The success of his art exhibition attracted 2 men from Hong Kong, Ye Qianyu, artist and editor-in-chief of China Today, and Zheng Guangyu, editor of Xingtao Daily. They came to Macau to see the exhibition and invited Guan Shanyue to have an exhibition in Hong Kong. 1 month later, Guan Shanyue's art exhibition was held in Hong Kong, attracting attention of the press as well as people in intellectual circles. Many cultural celebrities published their reviews in newspapers, praising his works as powerful condemnations of the barbarian acts of the Japanese invaders. or boosting the passions of the compatriots to fight against the enemy, and calling him a rising star of the Lingnan school.
The success of his painting exhibitions greatly encouraged Guan Shanyue. He took risks coming back to Guangzhou, hoping to use his brush to contribute to the war of resistance against Japanese aggression. But during those tragic war-dominated years, it wasn't easy turning his brush into a weapon to reach the people of China. Left with no choice, he embarked on a long journey and sketched along the way.
Guilin is acclaimed for its natural beauty. Since ancient times, its mountains and rivers have been highly praised by poets, artists, and all those who have a chance to appreciate its brilliant landscape. Guilin is the first stop on Guan Shanyue's long journey. As soon as he arrived, he was deeply attracted by its landscape. Every day he spent many hours sketching the mountains and rivers, trying to perceive the essence of nature. It was during this time he began to reflect upon the ancient saying, "True teaching comes from nature." He came to the conclusion that whoever made the first painting about the mountains and waters must be inspired by nature. Therefore, he decided to observe and imitate nature for the purpose of innovating Chinese painting. Based on dozens of sketches, Guan Shanyue finally completed his long scroll, 100 miles of the Lijiang River. This is the first time he freed himself from the bondage of traditions and tried to depict real landscape. During this process, he learned an important lesson. Continuous traveling is the source of inspiration for an artist. No moving, no painting. That became his motto. Guilin was a place of bliss for Guan Shanyue. Here he became reunited with his wife. When Guangzhou was occupied by the Japanese, his wife survived by retreating with the Chinese army. After so many twists and turns, the husband and wife finally found each other in Guilin. To commemorate their reunion, Guan Shanyue made a seal with the inscription, "The mountain remains unchanged." They remained close to each other for the rest of their lives, accompanying each other in all sorts of activities. They went sketching together or organized the exhibitions and sales together.
抗战呢，也是成全关老的很重要的一个方面。由于这种战争底下这种社会的不稳定，使得各地的艺术家之间的交流啊，基本上就没有什么太多的障碍。他走到哪里就做他的抗战画展，一方面呢宣传抗战，一方面呢他也可以卖一些画，维持自己走下一站的这样一个经历。同时呢，又通过办展览跟不同的艺术家的交流，对他的就无疑是很好的一个提升。
As his journey continued, Guan Shanyue's exhibitions attracted more and more attention from many influential cultural celebrities. In Guiyang and Kunming, Xu Beihong came to his exhibitions. In Chengdu, Zheng Daqin purchased a painting from Guan Shanyue. In Chongqing, famous writer Guo Moruo praised his works highly, and famous educator Tao Xingjue invited him to teach at his school. Chongqing was a city that treated Guan Shanyue very well. It was here that he enjoyed successes with his exhibitions. But more importantly, he became friends with many cultural celebrities. Musician Ma Sutong, oil painter Wu Zuoren, and traditional Chinese painter Fu Baoxie. Most importantly, he met a man who was to take him upon an unusual journey. That man was Zhao Wangyun, the future leader of the Chang'an Art School. At the end of 1943, Guan Shanyue and Zhao Wangyun started their journey to Dunhuang, located in the depth of the desert. This was the first time he traveled to northwest China. And he was deeply impressed by the landscapes along the way and the Gobi Desert that seemed infinite. When he finally reached the famous Moagao grottos, he was shaken to the core by what he saw. This treasury of ancient artworks impacted him both visually and spiritually.
到了敦煌，吸收了很多民族艺术很精华部分的东西，那种博大的、敦厚的、古朴的这些东西呢，都对他产生了很大影响。
他跟他太太在那里待了1个月，大概现在临了将近有88张、89张的敦煌陵画。这次的敦煌临摹呢，对他对色彩、对中国画的另外一种的认识呢，起了很大的作用。
The brilliant murals in the grottos conquered Guan Shanyue's heart. Out of passionate love toward those murals, created by unknown ancient artists, he spent days and nights imitating them. In over a month, he completed nearly 100 imitation works, which was an accomplishment in extreme difficulties. At the time, life was miserable in Dunhuang due to unpleasant weather, rough living conditions, scarcity of food, and lack of light in the grottos.
窑洞里面是黑茫茫的，没有灯光。他想临摹、想画那些看不见，然后我妈妈想办法，要不就找到蜡烛，要不就是小洋灯这样点着照着，让他能够看到来临摹下来。
Guan Shanyue would never forget how his wife held the light for him to complete the imitation of the mural in the grotto of Dunhuang. Even in his final years, he remembered those nights. In 1993, when his wife passed away, he wrote in tears this line: "The candlelight at Dunhuang is bright forever." In 1944, Guan Shanyue said goodbye to Zhao Wangyun and returned to Chongqing, where he showed more than 100 new paintings he was inspired to complete during his trip in northwest China. His new works impressed the entire art world. Xu Beihong commented, "The dramatic change is accomplished with exceptional understanding of the essence of art." Guo Moruo was especially intrigued by Guan Shanyue's work and even wrote a poem for his work, Tolling of Camel Bells in the Desert. For another painting, Dwellings of the Mongols, Guo Moruo wrote a commentary. Through his travels in the Northwest, Guan Shanyue has learned about life in remote areas. With sketches of real life, he broke out of bondage of traditions, which became the dawning light of Chinese painting. By this time, Guan Shanyue had left Shaoguan for 5 years, and this exceptionally long journey became a source of inspiration for his creative work the rest of his life.
1949 was the most important year for the People's Republic of China. That year, Guan Shanyue took refuge in Hong Kong and with other patriotic painters created a 30-meter-high painting titled "The Chinese People Have Stood Up." They sent the painting to Guangzhou and had it hung on the tallest building at that time in the city. Let art serve the times. This was the theme of Guan Shanyue's paintings for a very long time.
Guan Shanyue came back to Guangzhou and began to teach at the city art school. Soon he began to work as deputy dean of the art department at the People's Art Academy of South China. On September 7, 1950, Guan Shanyue spoke at the opening ceremony of the academy. His speech was entitled, "How Will the Chinese Painting Serve the People?" In the next months, he began to actively be involved in the land reform movement. 3 years later, Guan Shanyue's painting, The Newly Built Road, was an official selection of the Second National Art Exhibition and later became part of the collection of the Ministry of Cultural Affairs. This is the first masterpiece Guan Shanyue created since the founding of the New China. In this painting, through the composition of the road, the car, and the apes, one could feel his good humor.
在悬崖峭壁上修了一条新公路，汽车开过来了，从来没见过骑着的猴子都上树了。你想，很生动了吗？新中国的新建设，给人一种欣喜感情，一下就传达出来了。他的画不是标语口号式的宣传，是从眼睛到心怀，对新中国新建设的一种歌颂。
Another painting he completed during this period was Gains of the Day, which was known as a masterpiece featuring flowers and birds, although it was dramatically different than traditional paintings. It was a depiction of that special time.
因为那个时候要除四害，打了好多麻雀，死的、关在鸟笼里的，都放在那里。哎，他把这个花鸟画的表现跟这个时代的这样的一个主题，就很好的巧妙的结合在一起了。20多年以后，他又重新在上面拔了一段，当时把麻雀当的四害是委屈了麻雀，现在的四人帮倒了，这才是真正的四害。我觉得这个也很有意思。
他是把对新中国的热爱融入在创作里头。 诗性的表达，是一种浪漫主义的表达，体现了他的艺术上的智慧。
The motto of the Lingnan School artists is, painting and calligraphy should progress with time. Guan Shanyue not only carried on the tradition his teacher Gao Jianfu started and depicted the reality of 1950s China, but also actively participated in the movement of the society. In November 1956, he took the oath on becoming a member of the Communist Party of China. In 1957, Guan Shanyue made a long scroll, Leap Forward in Villages, 15 meters in length and 31 centimeters in width, a depiction of the Great Leap Forward movement of the time. With a combination of realistic and romantic approaches, it depicted zealous working scenes of ordinary people, and the fusion of traditional landscapes and realistic scenes became a new style. This painting became well known because it was an official selection of the art exhibition of socialist countries in Moscow.
Among Guan Shanyue's representative works, one is the most important. This is the largest ink and wash painting in the history of China. It's almost 50 square meters. It's hung in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. It's become a witness of an era.
At the end of April 1959, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the founding of the New China, the General Office of the State Council called Guan Shanyue and Fu Baoshue, a famous artist from Nanjing, to Beijing and commissioned them to make a huge painting for the Great Hall of the People. The painting was supposed to be a depiction of Mao Zedong's poem, Snow, and Premier Zhou Enlai decided that the title for the painting should be So Beautiful is the Land. How to include landscapes of different places and changes of different seasons in one painting was a challenging task for both Guan Shanyue and Fu Baoshue. Moreover, the two artists had never collaborated before, and they had to find a way to incorporate their different styles in one painting seamlessly. Later, Guan Shanyue wrote in his memoir, "During a creative process of 4 months, we both focused on the work itself, and with mutual respect and common purpose, we considered only how to take the best advantages of our capacities to accomplish this arduous task.
作为国家10周年献礼的建筑，应该说，当今中国所有著名的画家的作品在人民大会堂都有。那么，作为岭南画派跟这个金陵画派的代表性人物，这2个画家来画这个江山如此多娇呢，应该是非常合适的人选。
这张画的过程呢，他曾经跟我写信，领导从头过尾都很关心，国务院、陈毅都是经常去看、出主意、提意见，最后是周总理来看，通过。
This gigantic work was the result of a successful collaboration of 2 brilliant artists. Guan Shanyue was in charge of the pine trees in the foreground and the Great Wall and the snow mountains in the background, while Fu Baoshua was focused on streams, waterfalls, and rocks. During the entire process of collaboration, they had mutual respect and appreciation of each other's styles and techniques, and managed to achieve unity and harmony overall.
说是说他画远山，你画水，实际上经常是互补的。2个人站得远远一看的，哦，那里差一点点，然后就去加以比或者怎么之类的。
Their efforts were proven to be a huge success. It became a masterpiece for both artists, an outstanding example of art in the history of the new China. Mao Zedong inscribed on this painting his verse, "So beautiful is the land," which was used as its title.
这张画可以说20世纪中国山水画的一个里程碑，总理亲自刷的，最后毛泽东题字的，这也绝无仅有的，再也不会有第2张了。
In 1953, Guangzhou Academy for Fine Arts was established. Guan Shanyue was appointed as the vice president and dean of the Department of Chinese Painting. As a master of art, he devoted himself to the training of young painters.
As the successor of the Lingnan School of Art, Guan Shanyue was first a practitioner and then a teacher of the realistic ideals, seeking for a fresh and different look. In the classroom, he encouraged the students to manipulate their calligraphic brushes creatively. He invited his daughter to pose as a model in the classroom and showed students how to make a vivid portrait quickly. The painting entitled "Threading a Needle" was one of his best-known portraits. He believed that a good teaching and learning process would benefit both the teacher and the student, and encouraged the teachers and students to explore together how to let their works progress with time.
他以及跟他的同事们所建立的我们中国画系的教学体系，应该是岭南文化的岭南画派。关山月先生作为当时的一个大师，身体力行来教学，跟学生一起来共同创作，在教育上他也是一个比较好的典范。所以在这一意义上，这绝对是一个大师。巨匠。
He took his students to the countryside to observe real life with unique cultural values. Collaborating with the young students, he created another big piece, Declaring War on the Ocean, which was a depiction of the zeal and ambition to conquer nature in that special period. As an organizer, he led his colleagues and students to Jinggangshan, Ruijin, and other revolutionary bases, and created a large number of revolutionary works. Today, these works have become an important part of the historical heritage of the Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts.
In spite of his advanced age, Guan Shanyue didn't stop painting. He reached another creative peak in his 70s. He wanted to paint all of China's magnificent rivers and mountains in a series titled My Motherland.
Guan was a seasoned traveler. His footsteps ranged from the Yellow River to the Yangtze River, from the Tian Shan Mountain to the Yellow Mountain, from Mount Tai to the Great Wall. He became a legend in the artistic world.
笔墨要垂携带，不能够老是仿古，应该有新的东西，有你自己从生活里面感受的东西。所以他非常重视生活的。他到了80多岁，还到了西沙写生。
In the hot summer of 1992, Guan Shanyue was already in his 80s when he came to visit the Shisha Islands. He planted a palm tree there and created another huge scroll, dragon-shaped clouds lying above the sea. He had a plan to create a series called The Motherland. And in his article, My Statement, he wrote, "Everybody ages, which is the law of nature. But I'd like to keep myself young through the bittersweet process of artistic work. And I hope to create a few more works in this series." In 1993, Guan Shanyue lost his wife, who was married to him for more than 50 years. Grieving, Guan Shanyue often went back to his hometown, searching for inspiration from the familiar scenes. He not only created a lot of works there, but also made a big contribution to his hometown in education and development. He also donated many works to his hometown. Perhaps because of his childhood memories, plum trees remained an important part of Guan Shanyue's artistic work. In his final years, he created quite a number of paintings of plum trees in bloom, which had reached, if not surpassed, the height of ancient painters. As a tenured professor of Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts, Guan Shanyue kept himself very busy. Apart from teaching and painting, he also spent a lot of time traveling to exhibitions, lectures, or conferences. He described his life as a meaningful day that ends with a brilliant sunset. On June 25, 1997, Guan Shanyue's art gallery was completed in Shenzhen. With his donation of 813 artworks and a large number of valuable books and materials. In November 1997, Guan Shanyue donated 145 artworks to the gallery of Lingnan School, Guangzhou Academy of Fine Arts. Then he donated 105 works of art to the municipal government of Guangzhou. On June 30th, 2000, Guan Shanyue became ill due to frequent traveling and lack of rest. After 3 days of treatment, his life was nearly at an end. But in his final hours, he seemed to have some unfinished wish.
用医生的话说，他还在等人。我是知道，等我的儿子回来。他出国留学以前，他也跟他说过，你出去学习可以，但是一定要回来为祖国服务。
我的祖父病危，老人家最后的时候也希望见一下，所以那时候刚好在外婆嘛，然后就赶回来，也是算是见了他最后一面吧。当时他说不出话，但是我感觉到他还是听得到。
虽然他没说出话，但是医生说他听到他叫爷爷的时候， 他的血压突然间崩了一下，而且流眼泪了。
On July 3, 2000, Guan Shanyue, at the age of 89, died at the Guangzhou Medical University Hospital, with his last wish fulfilled.